In this lesson, we're going to be estimating quotients using multiples. Now, we're not looking to find the exact answer. All of these questions that we're going to be looking at are going to have a remainder, and we don't want to know what the remainder is yet. We just want to estimate and find, well, what is our quotient in between? So when we do end up and we go and solve these problems, we can find and be sure that what we're finding is correct. So let's go ahead and take a look at some vocabulary. We have our dividend, that's the number we're dividing into. Our divisor is going into our dividend. Our divisor is splitting up our dividend into pieces. Our quotient is the answer to our division problem. And then our remainder is what's left over. Lots of times our division problems, our divisor is not going to go in evenly into our dividend. And so we're going to have something left over. And that's going to be our remainder. If we take a look on the bottom end, we have just a little different version, same division. Our dividend is inside of our house, if we want to call it a house. That's what we're dividing into. Our divisor is going to go inside of our house. And then we have our quotient, which is our answer to our division problem. The number of equal sections that our divisor goes into our dividend, and then our remainder is what is left. So it's important for us to understand what all these words are. If I were you, I'd make sure I write this down in my math journal. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the definition of a multiple. Because in this lesson we are estimating the quotients using multiples, and so it's important that we know what a multiple is. A multiple is a number that can be divided by another number without a remainder. We can use skip counting to list our multiples. Let's take a look at some multiples. If I wanted the multiples of the number 5, I could use skip counting to help me find my multiples. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. Now, there are multiplication problems associated with all of these numbers. 5 times 1 gives us 5. 5 times 2 gives us 10. 5 times 3 gives us 15. 5 times 4 gives us 20. And 5 times 5 gives us 25. And so on and so forth. We could keep going and going and going with our multiples. They just go on forever. Now, in order for us to find our quotients and for us to estimate our quotients, we're going to need to use our multiples to help us. Now, multiplication is just the opposite of division. Division is the opposite of multiplication. We can turn our problems back and forth to help us understand how these all work. So let's take a look at this problem. We have 45 divided by 6. Now, if we think about our basic facts, which we did our last lesson, 45 and 6 does not go evenly into 45. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my multiples to help me, and I'm going to list my multiples off to the side. I'm going to list my multiples of 6, my divisor. Now, we can start with something like 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, and we can list all of them, and that would be great. That would take some time, though. Now, my goal with listing my multiples is to look at my product in these multiplication problems. And I'm looking for the product that my dividend falls between. I'm looking for two products that my dividend falls between. So instead of me starting here with 6 times 1, I'm going to start with a fact that I know and then build up from there that I know is close to 45. A good starting point would be something like 6 times 5. I know that 6 times 5 is equal to 30. I also know that 30 is less than my dividend of 45. So this is where I'm going to start. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to list my multiples until I get a multiple and a product that is just below my dividend and then just above my dividend. I want to create a sandwich. So I'm going to go ahead and list my multiples. I have 6 times 5. Next comes 6 times 6. That gives me 36. 6 times 7 gives me 42. 6 times 8 gives me 48. And again, I'm looking for that sandwich. I'm looking where 45 fits in. And I think I found it with this problem. If I go right here, I could put 45 between these two numbers, and that would be my smush. That would be my sandwich. So I'm going to go ahead and stop. I've listed all of the multiples that I need to list. And now I need to figure out, well, which of these numbers do I need to focus on? My divisor is 6, and we have our divisors listed first. The next number in our multiplication problem is what we're looking for. Two numbers, when we multiply them together, they're called factors and they give us a product. When we're listing our multiples and we're using them in this division to help us find our estimate, we're looking for the second factor that we're multiplying. That's what we're going to focus in on. These numbers in blue, those are going to be what our quotient is going to fall between. So that's what we're going to list. Our estimate for our quotient for this problem is going to be between 7 and 8. And that's what we're looking for from this problem. We're not looking to find the exact quotient. We're not looking for the remainder, but we're looking for our sandwich. What is our quotient going to fall between? Our quotient is going to fall between 7 and 8. Okay, let's look at our next problem. For this next problem, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and we're going to list our multiples of 5. 5 because 5 is our divisor. Now, I could start with 5 times 1, 5 times 2, 5 times 3, but let me start with something that I know that's going to get me closer to 32. I don't want to start all the way down at the beginning. I'm going to start at 5 times 5. I know that this product of 25 is going to be less than my dividend, so that's a good starting point for me. I want to have a starting point that's lower than my dividend and then work up. So I'm going to start with 5 times 5. I'm always going to list my dividend or my divisor first. So now I'm going to do 5 times 6. That gives me 30. 5 times 7 gives me 35. And now I can stop. I don't need to continue because my dividend now falls between these two products. So that's what I was looking for. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a box around my factors of 6 and 7. And that is what my quotient is going to fall between. So my quotient is going to fall between 6 and 7. Now, I want to look even closer. And I want to think, okay, if right here gives me 32, which is closest? Is my actual quotient going to be closer to 6 or 7? The way I find that out is by looking at these products. Is the product of 30 or the product of 35 closer to my dividend of 32? So I could use a number line to help me, or I can just think, okay, what do I have to do if I'm going from 30 to 32? I need to add 2. What do I need to go if I'm going from 32 to 35? I need to add 3, which means that 30 is closer to 32 than 35 is, which also means that my quotient of 6 here is going to be closer to my actual product. So I'm going to list my two products that it's going to be between, or my two quotients, excuse me, that it's going to be between, and then I'm going to say my quotient is going to be about 6. It falls between 6 and 7, but it's going to be closer to 6. Okay? I want you to go ahead and list your multiples for 7. 7 is our divisor, and find the two multiples that fall between, that are 94 falls between. Find those two products, and then look at the factors. What two factors does it fall closest to? Now for this problem, I'm not going to start with 7 times 1. I would actually probably start with 7 times 10. 7 times 10 is going to give me 70. And then I'm going to work up from there. 7 times 11, and that's going to give me 77. Then I have 7 times 12, and all I have to do, even if I don't know what 7 times 12 is, and I don't really want to multiply that, I'm just going to add 7 more. So 7 plus 7 is 14, and then I carry, and so I have 84. Then I have 7 times 13, and that's going to give me 91. 7 times 14, and remember, I'm looking for this 94 here. 7 times 14 is going to give me 98, and no, I can stop now because my 94 has now found its sandwich. My 94 fits perfectly between my 91 and my 98. So I'm going to put a box around my two factors of 13 and 14, and that's what my quotient is going to fall between. Now, my next step is for me to find my about. Which is it closest to? Is 94 closer to 91 or to 98? If I'm not sure, I can count up. 91 plus 3 gives me 94, but 94 plus 4 gives me 98. So my actual quotient is going to be closer to my 13, because that's the number that I'm multiplying by to get to 91. So my actual quotient is going to be about 13. So these are the two pieces you're going to need for this problem. All right, let's go ahead and look at our next problem. We have 52 divided by 3. I want you to go ahead and list your multiples. Find the two numbers that our quotient is going to fall between, and then which is going to be closest to our actual quotient. If I'm starting with this problem, I'm going to go ahead and start with 3 times 10, because I know that, and that's going to give me a good jump start. And then I'd list my multiples from there. So 3 times 11 gives me 33. 3 times 12 gives me 36. And I'm going to keep listing until I find my sandwich. So I need to get all the way up a little bit past 52. So now I'm at 3 times 17 gives me 51, and 3 times 18 gives me 54. And I found my sandwich. My 52 fits right between 51 and 54. I'm going to put a box around my two factors of 17 and 18. And those two numbers are going to be what my actual quotient falls between. So now I need to figure out, well, which is going to be closer to my actual quotient? Is it going to be 17 or is it going to be 18? In order for me to do that, I'm thinking about 52. What do I need to do to get to 52? Well, when I'm at 51, I just need to add one more. When I'm going from 52 to 54, I need to add 2 more. So my actual quotient is going to be about 17 or closer to 17. Now, let's take a look at a larger division problem. And for a problem like this, you don't need to go ahead and do your multiples increasing by 1. That would take us a really long time, and we get a really specific estimate that's not necessary. So when our number, our dividend, is at least 20 times what our divisor is, then we can start counting by multiples of 10. What I mean by that is I can do 4 times 10 equals 40. Now I can jump to 4 times 20 equals 80. 4 times 30 equals 120. 4 times 40 equals 160. I don't need to go step by step, one number by one number by one number. It's not necessary. So again, I'm still looking for my sandwich, and I found it, so I can stop. My 113 falls between my 80 and my 120. So it's right there in that sandwich. So I'm going to put my box around 20, and I'm going to put my box around 30. And so I'm going to write between 20 and 30. And now I need to think, which is it closer to? Is 113 closer to 120, or is it closer to 80? 113 is only 7 away from 120, and it's a lot more than that away from 80. So my actual quotient is going to be a lot closer to 30. So it's going to be about 30. I'm looking to see which it's closer to in my sandwich, and then I'm going to go to the factor of the multiplication problem. Okay, so those are my two answers, between 20 and 30 and about 30. Okay, for this next problem, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not going to list my multiples of 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3. I'm going to list my multiples of 8 times 10s. So I'm going to start with 8 times 10, 8 times 20, 8 times 30. I'm going to find my sandwich. What does it fall between? And then I want to know, which is it closest to? Go ahead and solve this problem now. All right, so I found my sandwich. My sandwich is right here. I have 233, and it fits right between 160 and 240. So I'm going to put my box around my factors, and I'm going to tell myself, or I'm going to write on my problem, that my actual quotient is going to fall between 20 and 30. And now I want to know, which is it closest to? What is my actual quotient going to be about? So if I look at 233 is a lot closer to 240 than it is to 160. So my actual quotient is going to be about 30. Okay, we got just a few more problems to do. Go ahead and do the same thing for this problem. List all of your multiples of tens of our divisor of 9, and then find your sandwich. Tell me what it's between, and then I want to know what is it closest to, what is it about. Okay, I've gone ahead and listed my multiples, and I found my sandwich. So 412 fits right between 360 and 450. So I'm going to put a box around my two factors. So my quotient falls between 40 and 50. Now I want to know, which is it closer to? Is it closer to 360 or is it closer to 450? In order for me to find that out, I need to think about what 412 is closer to. If I was going from 360 up to 412, I would need to add 52. If I was going from 412 to 450, I would only need to add 38. So it's quite a bit closer to 450 than it is to 360. So my actual quotient is going to be closer to 50, or about 50. Two more problems for us to go tonight. I want you to do the same thing here. List your multiples of 6. Find your sandwich, which is it between, and then what is it closest to? All right, I have listed my multiples and I found my sandwich all the way down here. So 317 is between 300 and 360. So I'm going to put a rectangle around those two factors. And so my actual quotient is going to be between 50 and 60. And now I need to think, what is it closer to? Is 317 closer to 300 or is it closer to 360? 317 is quite a bit closer to 300, so my actual quotient is going to be about 50. I'm looking at that factor right there. Okay, last problem. A bottlenose dolphin eats 264 pounds of food in a week. About how much does the dolphin eat in a day? In a day, and I'm talking about a week. What do you think the division problem I'm going to set up for this problem would be? Go ahead and write your equation. For this problem, I know that there are 7 days in a week. So if it's eating this much food in a week and I want to know how much it's going to eat in a day, I'm going to have to do some division. 264 divided by 7. For this problem, I want you to go ahead and list your multiples of 10. Find your sandwich. Find what it's between. And then because our question's asking about, it's important for us to know which is it closer to. Okay, I found my sandwich right here. So 264 falls between 210 and 280. I'm going to put a rectangle around my two factors. So my actual quotient is going to be between 30 and 40 pounds of food, but I need to know which is it closer to. So I need to know which is 264 closer to. It's a lot closer to 280. So my actual product, or my actual quotient, is going to be about 40 pounds of food. About 40 pounds of food each day. All right. Important takeaways from this lesson. We're listing our multiples. If our dividend is more than 20 times our divisor, we can list our multiples of 10 to make it a little bit fast, a little easy. We don't need as specific of actual estimates. If our dividend is less than 20 times our divisor, we are going to need to list our multiples of ones of that divisor. It's important for us to put our squares or our rectangles around those factors. That gives us our sandwich, and then figure out which is closest. Those are our takeaways for today to find our estimates of our quotients. I'll see you tomorrow when we find our remainders.